When I look at this picture, I don't see a monster. I don't see a killer. I see a scared child. A child with eyes that are screaming, not out loud, but on the inside, pleading for someone, anyone to help. His face doesn't shout, it aches. His eyes look heavy, and not just tired, but swollen with confusion, fear, and sorrow. Maybe it's from crying. Maybe it's just what a child looks like after being taken from his parents, locked in jail, and surrounded by adults who already decided he was guilty. I don't know what George looked like before this photo, but in this one, he looks broken. So let's go back to South Carolina, 1944. Two little white girls, Betty June Binneker and Mary Emma Thames, went missing. They were later found brutally murdered in a shallow ditch, and suddenly a name surfaced. A mysterious, unidentified witness came forward claiming they saw the two girls talking to George and his sister. Now, we don't know who this witness was. All we know is that he was identified as the pastor's son, whoever that is. No name, no age, no race. Just pastor's son. Because that title alone was supposed to make him sound trustworthy. This person said he was standing several hundred yards away, yet somehow he knew the girls were asking about flowers. He knew George and his sister told them they didn't know where to find any. And wouldn't you know it, this same pastor's son just happened to be in the search party that found the bodies. Now, if you don't find that suspicious, never mind. Let's get back to the story. After the witness came forward, George was identified and arrested. He was taken from home and he never returned. He was interrogated alone with no parent, no attorney, no advocate. They didn't care he was a child. They didn't care that they violated his rights. They didn't care that his brain was not even fully developed. They didn't care because he was a black child. He was seen as an animal. In fact, I take that back. He wasn't seen as an animal because they wouldn't even do this to an animal. Once inside, they claim he confessed, but there's no audio, no video, no signed statement, no proof. And we've all watched enough Law and Order to know if there were two cases of blunt force trauma, there should have been blood. And if there had been even a smidgen of blood on George's clothes, it would have been on the front page of every paper in America. If there was an actual confession, it would have been played on every radio station in the tri state area. They would never skip out on the opportunity to make a black kid look like a criminal. But they didn't do it because they didn't have it, because it didn't exist, because it didn't happen. And let's not forget, George had no history of violence, no record, no reports, no stories about him hurting people or animals. He was a child. But again, that didn't matter. Because when it's our children, they don't see innocence. They see criminals, they see monsters, they see threats. And monsters don't get trials, they get cages or electric chairs. George's trial lasted just a few hours. No black people were allowed in the courtroom. His lawyer didn't call a single witness, didn't cross examine, didn't object. He didn't even pretend to fight. And it took the jury all of 10 minutes to decide that 14-year-old George Stinney Jr. should die. On the day of the execution, they had to stack books on the electric chair just to fit him. When asked for any last words, George looked up with those same heavy eyes and said, "No, sir." The guard pulled the mask down over his face, and that's when George started to cry. I guess that's when it finally hit him that he wasn't going home, that nobody was coming to save him, and that this was really it. That poor child went through more in 83 days than most adults go through in a lifetime. Some people sit on death row for years. George had less than 3 months to process his arrest, trial, conviction, and execution. And he probably didn't even understand half of what was happening. But the system moved fast because it was never about justice. It was about making an example. And what's worse, to this day, some descendants of the girls say justice was served. But how? How was that justice? No evidence, no signed confession, no credible witness, no legal defense, no appeal? That's not justice. That's not closure. That's not truth. That's murder. It took 70 years before they reopened George's case. And when they did, he was exonerated. Because what we knew then, they finally admitted now. That child was innocent. George could have made history as a football player, a writer, a leader, a doctor, but instead, the only record he broke was becoming the youngest person ever executed in the United States. And I already know what some of you are thinking, but that's because so many of us have become desensitized when it comes to black kids. But in case you were wondering, a 14-year-old today is not the same as a 14-year-old in 1944, especially not one growing up in the Jim Crow South. George Stinney Jr. never played Grand Theft Auto. He never watched Mortal Kombat. He never had a TikTok account. He never saw a violent movie or listened to a rap album or a heavy metal song. He wasn't influenced by YouTube or social media or video games. He didn't have time to be corrupted by the world. Those were real kids, innocent kids. And George's sister even testified that their mama didn't let them go nowhere without permission. And that's probably why the so called witness said they saw George with his sister. Because back then, especially in the South, black parents kept their children close. Not because they didn't trust them, but because they didn't trust the world outside. George was a 14-year-old boy, just like the one in your house asking what's for dinner. But George never got the chance to grow up. And I know some of y'all are still saying, that could never happen to my child. But nobody had a reason to think it would happen to George either. Yet it did. So be careful. Because if you think this system has changed, you haven't been paying attention. We saw what happened with the Central Park Five. Those boys were railroaded in the 1990s when things were supposedly more fair, more advanced, and more just. So imagine what it was like for poor George in 1944 with absolutely no one there to protect him. George's eyes tell the whole story. His eyes are a full testimony. And when I look at him, when I really look at that baby's face, I feel it in my chest. Because that child went through things no child should ever face, things grown men wouldn't survive. And people don't even blink because they don't even care. And honestly, stories like this make me want to take a mental health break because this one hits different. But again, this is why we share our stories because we're going to turn our pain into power. This is why we speak the truth because if we don't know it, they'll keep doing it. And if we don't say something, they'll pretend it never happened. So say his name, George Stinney Jr. He was a child, not a monster, not a murderer, just a boy, just a baby. And they killed him anyway.